The subject of vegetarianism and veganism is increasingly becoming part of the mainstream debate. Animal rights activists and environmentalists are doing their best to make people aware of the terrible consequences of a meat and dairy-based diet. Despite Hindus making up 80% of India, as little as 20% of the population actually adhere to a vegetarian diet. There is of course a secular, moral argument to be made in favour of being meat and dairy free. But what do the Hindu scriptures and Hinduism as a whole really have to say about meat eating? The first point to make is that vegetarianism is not a central hard and fast law of Hindu practice, which is something that Zakir Naik and others are keen to exploit.
Furthermore, there is a misconception that Hindus should not have non-veg. It's misconception. If you read the Hindu scriptures, it's mentioned in Manusmriti, chapter number 5, verse number 30, that Almighty God created some animals to eat and some to be eaten. If you eat the animals that have been created to be eaten, you're not doing a sin. It's mentioned in Manusmriti, chapter number 5, verse number 31, that Almighty God has created some animal for sacrifice. So if you kill the sacrificial animal, you're not doing a sin.
Zakir Naik makes the mistake of assuming that there is some original form of Hinduism from which Hindus today have all deviated from. Like many, he fails to understand that Sanatana Dharma is not a set of fixed archaic rules, but rather a collection of spiritual methodologies developed over millennia. The Manusmriti is one of thousands of texts and holds no real authority in Hindu thought today. This book is focused around the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. The Karma Kanda is all about the Vedic yajna and the results it can yield. This ritual was all about making offerings into the sacred fire, including animals. The remnants of these offerings would often be eaten by the Brahmins themselves. This was thought to be a way of appeasing the gods, and the different animals offered were believed to have been rewarded in higher realms. People seeking rains, children and pleasures in the afterlife would often engage in these sacrifices. In effect, the Karmakanda of the Vedas was a non-spiritual, mechanical process. It was seen to be a form of business with the different deities that existed in creation. But this is just one aspect of Hindu thought and practice. Today, yajnas with animal sacrifice are virtually unheard of. For thousands of years, it has been the Jnana Kanda, or knowledge section of the Vedas, where we find the real eternal truths of Hinduism. Truths which lie beyond the sacrificial ritual. This is where we see a discussion about the nature of reality, reincarnation, karma, and liberation. In fact, it is repeatedly stressed in the Upanishads, Puranas, and the Bhagavad Gita that the Vedic yajna is a lesser form of sacrifice when compared to the path of knowledge and devotion. It is generally used for superficial seekers that desire material gifts. Krishna states, "Those with limited understanding get attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas. They glorify only those portions of the Vedas that please their senses and perform pompous ritualistic ceremonies for attaining high birth, opulence, sensual enjoyment and elevation to heavenly planets." But when it comes specifically to meat eating, Bhishma, when instructing Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata, launches into a lengthy and aggressive attack on those who needlessly take the lives of animals. Amongst many other statements, he states, "The man who wishes to increase his own flesh by the meat of another living creature is such that there is none meaner and more cruel than he. In this world there is nothing that is dearer to a creature than his life. Hence, one should show mercy to the lives of others as he does to his own life. There is great sin attached to his eating meat, as indeed there is merit in abstaining from it." There are endless references in the Hindu scriptures which condemn or at least degrade animal sacrifice and meat eating. However, there are some commentators that would like to make out that the movement towards vegetarianism was entirely as a result of monastic orders, particularly Buddhism and Jainism. Apart from being overly simplistic, this theory makes the assumption that personalities like the Buddha and Mahavir had nothing to do with Hinduism. There is no doubt that Buddhist and Jain teachings reject the Vedas as revelation, but this does not divorce them from Hinduism as a whole. Both traditions believe that we as individuals are ultimately non-material, that we are bound by karma, and that we repeatedly reincarnate. The Buddha and Mahavir engaged in yoga practice under spiritual masters. Above all, they taught that the goal of life was about freedom from rebirth which ends all suffering. All of these ideas are central to the philosophical foundation of Hinduism and were already found in some form or another in the early Upanishads such as the Brihadaranyaka. Like all great Indian masters, the Buddha and Mahavir were revolutionary and sought to take individuals away from vain ritual to the ultimate goal of life. It was from this elevated stance that the value of ahimsa became prominent, and here lies the main point of how vegetarianism fits into Hindu discourse. Ahimsa is seen as a natural principle to be adhered to for one who is striving to pursue higher ideals, such as liberation from rebirth. If the aim of our life is to free ourselves from material conditioning, then there are certain values one has to imbibe. The Karmakanda ritual, as well as meat eating in general, has nothing to do with ultimate truth. They both aim to satisfy primitive instincts such as karma and artha. If, on the other hand, one is set upon spiritual transformation, then a whole different approach to life is needed. Patanjali, in his 8-limbed Ashtanga yoga system, lays down ahimsa as one of the yamas, or ethical acts of restraint. The whole point of these yamas is to discipline and nurture sattvic, or noble values that best place us to journey to higher states of consciousness. Compassion and reverence for life is a fundamental quality to realizing truth. Not only that, the full potential of compassion only manifests as we advance closer to our innate divinity. In Hindu thought, morality is inextricably linked to our spiritual evolution. As we adhere to ahimsa and develop deep empathy for life, we will inevitably grow spiritually. As we grow spiritually, we will inevitably be drawn even more to the principles of ahimsa. Krishna says, "The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater." The true self-realized individual can perceive the same inherent unity in all beings. When we are in such a state, the principle of ahimsa is inevitable. How can we hurt and induce suffering upon that which shares the same divinity? This realization of an inescapable oneness causes a sincere seeker of truth to see the value of life in its different forms. As a result, they treat all life and all creatures with reverence and compassion. Vegetarianism is a natural outpouring from the value of ahimsa. But an argument that is often made is, if we truly respect all life, then what about plants? Are they not worthy of our protection? The Padma Purana states that there are 8.4 million species that the jiva, or embodied soul, evolves through life after life, from the plant kingdom to the animal kingdom to finally humans. This progression involves a gradual movement from life forms which express a more dormant level of consciousness to those which display it in its fullness. Ahimsa is all about inflicting the least harm on those conscious entities around us. By modern standards, eating human flesh is considered the most barbaric of acts. Even the idea of eating dogs is considered to be abhorrent because we emotionally connect with them and we see just how close they are to our own nature. For some reason, we have manifested a perceptual blind spot when it comes to farm animals. Animals who have relationships and share feelings. Animals who can recognize us as individuals and respond personally to our emotions. Although they may not possess a sense of intellectual discrimination, these farm animals display all manner of characteristics akin to our own. Meat eating involves torturing physically and emotionally conscious life forms which are extremely close to us. With this in mind, one has to agree that the harvesting of food from plant life cannot be compared to the slaughter of animals. Many meat eaters would argue that life is all about survival of the fittest. There has always been a predator-prey scenario right from the beginning, and so humans are at the top of the hierarchical food chain. This makes sense if you wish to view ourselves as primate animals who abide by the law of the jungle. But Hindu thought takes us away from such an idea. Not only do the different traditions within Sanatana Dharma instruct us to move away from animalistic tendencies, they even urge us to move beyond mere human characteristics to a divine state. The journey from human to divine means core transformation, and according to Hindu thought, what we eat impacts and influences who we are. Krishna in the Gita does not comment on meat eating per se, but he does classify food according to the gunas. The point is, food should be of a sattvic quality if we are aspiring for spiritual ideals. Eating animals that have been killed, who have been placed in appalling conditions, fed hormones, denied freedom, undergone pain, fear and grief, cannot be considered sattvic food. The emotions and vibration of these persecuted animals naturally enters their flesh and bones that we so readily ingest. What we eat becomes part of us and inevitably affects our mind and disposition in subtle ways. Unlike plant life, animals are more complex and stronger in their nature. Consequently, they can influence our tendencies, encouraging restlessness and aggression. But what about if we treat animals well? What about if we give them the best possible life and then slaughter them for food? Would that not be acceptable? The short answer is no. Animals are highly evolved individual jivas, and therefore their life has intrinsic value. They are not commodities designed for our tongues, but autonomous conscious creatures. What right do we have to unnecessarily rob that animal of its existence? Just because we breed them, it does not mean we can kill them. Their life is theirs. Within many traditions of Hinduism, the cow is particularly valued. Throughout history, she has been honoured as one who has sustained families and societies through her milk and work on the farm. She is venerated as Gaumata, the mother who selflessly gives and nurtures. Looking after the welfare of cows was seen as one of the highest forms of service. In modern times, however, the cow has been shamelessly exploited not only for meat, but also for her milk. The dairy industry is perhaps the cruelest of all. Cows are reared in terrible conditions. They are forcibly impregnated and aggressively milked. Newly born calves are immediately removed from their mothers at birth. And when after numerous pregnancies and deliveries the cow's body is unable to sustain itself, it is sent for slaughter. In recent times, in the absence of happy cows, the principle of ahimsa has come to mean more than vegetarianism, but a vegan diet free from any form of dairy. The question we have to ask ourselves as individuals and as a society is, what are we aspiring to achieve? If we wish to indulge our life in a self-centered way, then we will be content to endorse the horrific cruelty that is inflicted upon animal life. We'll be happy to turn a blind eye and make our body the graveyard of innumerable corpses. If, on the other hand, we see that our lives are more than just about indulging in pleasure, and that we exist for a divine purpose, we will recognise that supreme divinity in all creatures. Naturally, under the narrative of Hindu truths and practice, we will move to a place of love where we will stand for the protection of all those around us. Many thanks for listening.